All right, you guys, this is the palette collection starting at the bottom. We'll work our way up for decluttering. The goal is to declutter at least 35 palettes, and I know I have a lot of palettes, so it's like, girl, that shouldn't be that hard, but like, I feel like I have worked so hard for so many of these palettes and like truly did love the majority of them at one time. I don't really have a strategy going into this. I mean, obviously I know some palettes, I have an idea of certain palettes that I want to declutter, and then I feel like there's some I'm on the fence on. So as we go through, there might be some that I like set to the side and come back to. Depending on how many palettes I've decluttered, maybe I'll declutter some in the like maybe pile. That's my plan for my strategy. But we're just gonna start right at the bottom. Let's see. So I will grab this first stack of Colourpop palettes. So up first we have the That's Taupe palette. I am gonna keep this palette. I do really like this for a cool toned option. This palette, the Enclad Blue, I am on the fence about just because I don't reach into blues that often. And yes, opening this up, I'm like, I genuinely don't feel like I need this palette. Like, a part of me wants to keep it because it is more unique to my collection, but I just do not wear blue eyeshadow. I'm gonna declutter this one. This is gonna be a declutter. My Mandalorian palette I will be keeping. I really like this one. I like the packaging, I like the greens, I think it's a fun one. I love this like green gold shade as well, so I will be keeping this. I will also be keeping my Colourpop Making Mauves. I haven't used this palette the most, but I do really like mauve tones, and I'm really excited to pull this out for the fall time. And then I'm also going to be keeping Colourpop Little Ray of Sunshine. This is a favorite of mine. It's an all matte palette. I think it's such a stunning palette, one of my favorites from Colourpop. Next up we have the Going Coconuts palette, another palette I will be keeping. I really like this for like a neutral brown tone option. It's just a palette that I feel like makes sense to my collection, so I will be keeping this. The Colourpop Sweet Talk palette, I actually think I am going to declutter. It's just not a color story that gets me super excited, and I feel like if I want to reach for tones like this, I would rather reach into something like my Sigma Corderosa palette, or even like my Natasha Denona Sunrise or Huda Beauty Coral Obsessions. This just isn't a palette that I loved as much as I thought I was going to, so I actually think I'm going to declutter this. The Colourpop One and Done I have not really loved, but this is new to my collection this year, and anything new to my collection this year I do want to keep for my end of year ranking. That may not make sense to everyone, but for me, I want to keep it in my collection, try it a few more times, see if my mind changes, and then maybe we'll end up decluttering this at the end of the year. But because I did purchase this year, I am going to keep this. And then my Colourpop Lush Life palette I also will be keeping. I really love this palette. I think this is such a fun one. Pretty unique to my collection. Like, yes, I have these tones, but not in a palette like this, obviously. So I will be keeping this one. My Colourpop Tinkerbell palette, this is one I'm like on the fence about. Like, I feel like I'm gonna end up, I do feel like this is more unique to my collection. Like, I don't have a shade quite like this or like this. I will keep this for right now. Okay, I'm gonna keep the Colourpop Tinkerbell, but I will be decluttering the Sweet Talk. More Colourpop palettes. I will be keeping all three of these. So I have the Wild Child palette, which I love. I also have the Cabana Club palette, which I think is such a fun one. This was like an unexpected palette last year. I wasn't gonna purchase this, and then I did, and then I really did end up enjoying this palette, so I will be keeping this. And then this was a favorite from last year. This is the Colourpop Limoncello palette. If I could open it. I absolutely love this palette. I think this is such, not like even an interesting color story, but just such a wearable palette. Like, I truly can get use out of all the shades. I don't reach for this blue shade all that often, but everything else I really do use and enjoy. This is something that even when I finished testing this last year, I like could not put this down. So I will definitely be keeping my Colourpop Limoncello palette. All right, and then I have a bunch of Colourpop quads, and I don't need all of these. So I am actually going to declutter this one right here. This one just isn't that inspiring to me. This is the Virgo one. Pisces in the Sky I'm going to keep. I do like this one. Then I have this one, which is really similar. So this is the Libra quad. It's very similar to the Creamsicle quad from Colourpop. So I'm going to declutter this one because I prefer the Creamsicle. I'm also going to declutter this one. This is the Sparkler palette. I just have these shades throughout my collection and just don't find myself reaching for this. So I'm going to declutter this. I'm going to keep the Taurus palette. I'm a Taurus. I love the colors in here. So keeping that. I'm also going to keep this one. I believe this is the Capricorn quad. Yes. This is the Capricorn quad. I love this one. I think it's just a great cool toned option, a very easy to reach for option. So I'm gonna keep that. I will be decluttering the Cancer quad. I just don't love this one as much as I thought I was going to, so I'm gonna declutter this. And then here is the Creamsicle quad that I was talking about. I will be keeping that. Okay, so out of my Colourpop collection, I was able to declutter 6 things. This is very exciting. That means 29 more palettes for me to find throughout everything to declutter. So let's go into my Natasha Denona minis down here. Okay, so I have Mini Nude, which isn't going anywhere because this is like a favorite in my entire collection. I have Mini Biba, which I think is amazing. I'll be keeping that. I also have the Mini Love palette, which doesn't get as much use for me, but I do really love this shade, as well as this shade and this shade. So I'm gonna keep this one as well. The Mini Gold. What sucks about these Natasha Denona mini palettes is you can't like depot these like you can the regular Natasha shades, because if I could, I would just say like I'm gonna depot these 3 shades and be done with it. I'm gonna put this in the maybe pile, but likely will keep this. So then I have the Mini Glam palette, which I will be keeping, as well as the Mini Retro palette, which I will be keeping. The Natasha Denona Mini Crush, if I didn't purchase this year, I would declutter this. I just was not impressed with this one, but I'll try it a few more times this year for my end of year ranking, and this is something I could see myself decluttering at the end of the year. And then I was gonna say I was going to declutter this Biba like little trio, but I don't know, like I feel like I could get use out of it. I'm gonna put this one in the maybe as well, because this would be like an easy declutter if I had to, but I do kind of want to keep it, but like am I really gonna use it? I don't know. I'm gonna put this in the maybe pile. Okay, actually this I genuinely just don't need. Like actually no, I'm gonna put this in the maybe pile. I don't know. Okay, this is going in the maybe pile. Okay, hold on. Let me look at my Natasha Denona regular Biba. Okay, I have 2 out of these 3 shades. The only one I don't have is this one right here, but it's very similar to Freckle. So I am gonna declutter this. I don't need this. I'm keeping my Natasha Denona Biba, by the way. Do we wanna just go right up the row and do the rest of my Natasha palettes? Because I will not be decluttering anything else from Natasha. So I included this face palette in my eyeshadow palettes just because like I use this quite frequently for the eyeshadows, and I love this for it. It's the Natasha Denona Glam Face Palette. Then I have the Natasha Denona Sunrise, such a pretty one. I have Natasha Denona Zendo, which wasn't a favorite of mine, but I'm not going to be decluttering this by any means. And then I have the Mini Retro Palette, which is such a beautiful mauve palette, as well as the not mini, but Midi Love palette. Again, such a beautiful option. And then I also have the Lila palette as well as the gold palette. Neither of these will be going anywhere. Love them both. Okay, maybe we can go up the side here a little bit with my Pat McGrath palettes. My large motherships are not going anywhere. Well, the only one I will say, let's just go in order. So here's my Bronze Seduction. This is one of my favorite palettes in my entire collection. This is not going literally anywhere. This is the one I would say if I had to declutter one, it would be this one. I do really love this shade right here, but like, do I need this? I don't know that I do. I wonder how this compares to, hold on. Okay, here are the special shades like swatched out from that palette. And truly the only like shade that's like really sticking out to me as like, I love this, is this one right here. Because I definitely have a dupe for this. This reminds me of one of my JD Glow shades. And this is pretty, but not something that I feel like I need in my collection. And honestly could dupe this with another indie shade. Do I really need to keep a palette for like a sparkly shade? Probably not, but it also kind of reminds me of the shade Inner Corner from the Natasha Glam palette, and I'm just curious how similar they are. So this one's more sparkly. Okay, the shades are a little bit different. On the eyes, they probably wouldn't be that, like, am I really gonna keep a palette for one shade? No. I don't think I am. Okay, I'm surprising myself, but I'm going to declutter this Pat McGrath Mothership palette. This was the Mothership 6, and I can't believe it, but I'm gonna declutter it. Okay, like literally so proud of myself. We are making moves in this eyeshadow palette declutter. Okay, the other 2 palettes I know I will be keeping. I have this one, which isn't like super special, but I do still like this one enough to keep it. Like I like this entire quad of shades, and I like this palette. This one's fine. I wouldn't repurchase this one, like if I could do it over again. And then this one is the newest. This is the Utopian Dream. This one is so beautiful, and I'm very excited to have this in my collection. This one will not be going anywhere. Okay, so then let's move on to my Huda Beauty quads. So I know I'm keeping the majority of my quads. I will be keeping the Smoky Obsessions palette. I love that one. It's a favorite of mine. I will also be keeping Coral Obsessions, another favorite of mine. Such a long time favorite, staple and classic. This won't be going anywhere. Gemstone Obsessions, I am going to declutter. 3 of my shades have broken, and I just, like, I can't be bothered with this palette anymore. It is time for me to declutter this one. And then I am going to be keeping the rest of my Obsessions palette. So I have the Wild Jaguar, the Wild Python, the Wild Tiger, as well as my Neon Orange palette, my Nude Medium, as well as my Nude Rich palette. All right, let's head back over this way. These 2 palettes I will be keeping. I have my Sugar Pill Bite Size palette. I love this palette. I think it's such a fun, colorful little mini palette. And then this one I got this year and really have been enjoying. This is from What's Up Beauty. It is their Geodes palette. Some really fun lid toppers / metallic shades within this palette. I like this one quite a bit. Okay, my Nabla Cutie palettes. I have not known what I'm gonna do with them. So I know no matter what, I will be keeping the Nabla Cutie Nude palette. This is a favorite of mine, as well as the Platinum palette. I also love a lot, so I'm keeping these 2 for sure. I will also keep the Metropolitan palette. I think this is a fun one. I really like these 3 shades, and then I think this shade is also a really fun, like punchy coral shade, so I will keep this. I feel like this Wildberry palette, the only reason I'm keeping this palette is for these 2 shades. So I'm gonna swatch these 2. So here's Alchemy 2. I definitely feel like I actually feel like those aren't wowing me at all with the swatches. Okay. I am going to declutter. I'm going to declutter this one from Nabla. So I'm going to declutter the Nabla Wildberry Cutie palette. Okay. Proud of myself for decluttering a Nabla palette. I love Nabla. Then I have the Analog palette, which is beautiful. I'm going to keep this one. This is something I would use. Yeah, I'm going to keep the Analog palette. And then the Midnight palette, I like cannot decide about. But I did declutter. Let's see. This is like such an interesting shade. And then what does Air look like? Swatched. I don't think I have like a pastel. Okay. This might have to be a maybe. This is kind of unique though. I really like this Quiet Storm shade, but I'm wondering if it's similar to something I have in one of my palettes that Angie did a collaboration with. I can't remember if it's the Kaleidos collab or the Odin's I Want. I'm gonna keep these swatched here and put this one in the maybe pile. And then I'll be keeping my other 4 Nabla palettes. So I have the glitter palette, the Glorious Lights glitter palette, which I got this year, and I've actually really enjoyed this. I have the Dreamy palette, which isn't like my favorite from Nabla, but I do still really like this one. Do I? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not ready to get rid of this. The Dreamy 2 I like so much better than the Dreamy 1. Okay, I'm going to put this in my maybe pile. Because I just, like if I don't reach my goal, this is something I could see myself potentially decluttering. This is a maybe. My Nabla Side by Side is a favorite palette of mine. This is not going anywhere. And then the Nabla Read My Mind palette I also purchased this year, but I've really been enjoying this, and this will not be going anywhere. All right, moving us up. Okay, so my Be Perfect Carnival palette is not going anywhere. It's a huge palette. Definitely not an everyday palette for me, but I also don't have a palette with all these colors in my collection, so I will be keeping this. Colourpop Stone Cold Fox is not like a favorite of mine, but it is nice to have. But if I don't reach my goals, I could potentially see myself decluttering just because I still have the That's Taupe. I'd like to keep this, but I'm going to put this in my maybe pile just in case I don't get close to that 35 number. And then the Getting Fresh palette I purchased this year, so this will not be getting decluttered. This didn't turn into a favorite of mine, but I don't not like it. It just, I was a little bit let down by some of the quality of some of the shades, but this will be staying. I will absolutely be keeping my Tiny Marvels palette from Sydney Grace. I love this palette so much. Such a unique color story, so pretty, great quality. And then my KVD or Kat Von D Alchemist palette is like an all-time favorite for me for inner corner highlighting. I love this palette so much. This is definitely not going anywhere. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. My Pat McGrath quads. I don't need all of them. Okay, so here is, I believe, Voyeuristic Vixen. I do really like this quad. I will keep this. This one. Okay, so this is, I believe, Flora Fantasia. And I need to swatch these two because they're obviously the only reason I keep the quad. Like, I don't reach for pinks that often, but really I bought the palette for this shade right here, but it's really this shade that I feel like is holding me back from potentially decluttering. But like, am I gonna, I like how like, it's like, has like a hint of like a purple undertone. I'm gonna keep this swatched and put this in the maybe pile. I don't feel like I need to keep this, but I don't know. I'm gonna think about this one. This is going in the maybe pile. Okay, so then I have this one, which I am gonna be decluttering. This just like did not turn into a favorite of mine. This is the Eternal Eden quad. These two shades are pretty, but nothing special. So I will be getting rid of this one. And then this one right here, I will absolutely be keeping. This is my favorite quad. This is the Celestial Divinity quad. I love all of these shades so much. This palette, or this quad, is not going anywhere. Okay, for those of you keeping track at home, we have 11 palettes currently decluttered. What's the math on that? 24 left. We have 24 left to declutter. Oh my gosh, I'm like getting stressed out. Okay, my Nars palettes aren't going anywhere, keeping all of them. These two I purchased this year. So this is the Summer Unrated palette. One of my shades broke, but I love this palette. I love the Nars eyeshadow formula. Honestly, I think it's great. And then I purchased this little 6-pan this year, so this is not going anywhere either. This is the Suede palette. This is the Summer Solstice palette. This made me fall in love with Nars last summer. This is what the palette looks like. Definitely keeping. And then I'm also going to keep my Nars Climax palette. The quality on this one wasn't, like, the mattes don't blend as seamlessly, but I do really like the formula of the like chunky like foiled shades. Love so much, so I will be keeping this as well. So I have the Oma Beauty Coming to America palette, which I just have barely reached for at all, but I do want to play around with this palette before I go decluttering it, so I'm going to keep this one. And then the Ace Beaute Falling For You palette, I don't even think I've reached into this yet. I believe my sister gifted this to me towards the end of last year, and I actually like this color story, especially for the fall time, so I actually am going to keep this and hopefully get some use out of it. The Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 3 palette is brand new to my collection. This is absolutely not going anywhere. And then this Marc Jacobs 7-pan palette, I've fallen in love with this year. This is the Electric palette. You can't get this anymore, but I'm so happy that I have this. It's such a good one. I'm definitely keeping this. Okay, we need to find a couple more declutters. Two that I think I can declutter are these two right here. So I have the Lime Crime Venus 3. I just was not impressed with this palette. I do actually like the color story, but in practice, I just did not think the quality of the shades was that good. And then I have this one from Illamasqua, and this one just like does not inspire me to reach into it. I just think it looks like a pretty boring palette, and like I do love me a good boring basic palette, but there's something about like these three shades which all look almost identical that like I just can't get behind, and I don't need this palette in my collection. Colored Rain Queen of Hearts, I feel like is constantly on the chopping block for me, but I just can't get myself to declutter it, especially this close to the fall time. Like, I'm very excited to hopefully feel motivated and inspired by this fall, so this will be staying. Okay, we'll go into these mishmash palettes, if you will. So I have my one quad from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Exaggerized quad. I am gonna keep this. I'm not super like uber wowed by it, but I would like to have this just because it's my only Charlotte Tilbury eyeshadow in my collection, and I can still get use out of this one. Like, it's not a bad formula, it just doesn't like make me excited to reach for it. My Tom Ford quad, I just can't get myself to declutter because I paid so much for it. I wish I had gone with a more everyday wearable color story. I do really like these two shades, and I honestly really like, I like the quad in general. It's just way too overpriced in my opinion. I do think I'm going to declutter this Makeup by Mario quad. This is the Bronzy Glam quad, and the quality in this is really good. I just don't find myself reaching for this because I have similar shades to most of these throughout other palettes that are like larger palettes that I'm reaching for, so I think I can declutter this. And then I will be keeping my Viseart Soleil La Plague palette. I should have pulled this out more often this summer. Shame on me for not doing that, especially because I've been so into yellows and I'm like vibing right now with this. In fact, I'm gonna go put this in my bathroom after filming this so that I can film with this palette or use this palette in a look this week. I actually really ended up loving this palette. I have not been a fan of Viseart shadows in the past, but this I was really impressed with, and I'm so happy to have this in my collection. I am gonna keep my M Cosmetics Divine Skies eyeshadow palette. I really like this one. It's a really cute 6-pan palette, really beautiful like rosy mauve tones, but also like some brown neutrals as well. So I'll be keeping this. It's my only M Cosmetics palette. All right, my last two Pat McGrath palettes to get through. I will be keeping this one. This is a favorite of mine, especially if I am looking for pink tones. Ooh, and let's see how these two compare. Okay, this one's more pinky, whereas this one has more purple in it. But are they similar enough? I don't know. I don't know. I'm keeping this in the maybe pile for now. And then I also, so this was the Rose Decadence palette, and then I'll also be keeping my Sublime palette. This is going on my palettes on their last two raw. I always say this palette is like on my permanent chopping block, but don't feel like I'll ever end up decluttering this. So this will be staying. I can tell you right now I will not be getting rid of any of my Odin's Eye palettes. So I have the Alva palette, and I'm trying to see, I don't think this one's similar to, no, but ooh, dang, that's pretty. I need to pull this out too. Let me swatch this. Okay. Okay. Anyway, this is the Alva palette. Then I have the Norns palette, which is another palette that I really, really love. I have these two 6-pan palettes. So I have the Mini Forest palette, which is such a cute one. And then I have the Mini Verdandi palette. I'm probably butchering that name, but that's what that one looks like. Then I have the Odin's Eye Solman or Solmane palette. My favorite currently right now is the Helia palette, or Hella palette, sorry, not Helia, Hella palette. So freaking beautiful. And then also I have the Saga Freya palette, which looks like this. Honestly, like, I did purchase this one this year, so I won't be decluttering this one, but I just don't feel as inspired by this as I thought I was going to be when I purchased this. But I'll still be keeping this nevertheless. All right, a couple of indie palettes. I have the Pastel Pup palette from Menagerie. I will definitely be keeping. This is very unique to my collection. I do really enjoy this palette and would like to try more from Menagerie. And then the only Nomad palette that I currently own is the Fire and Ice palette, which I wasn't like so stinking impressed with the quality that I like was running out to purchase more. Although I will say Nomad has, they always have color stories that intrigue and inspire me. I do kind of want to purchase a couple more palettes from them. If I were to purchase from Nomad in the future and get a color story that's more wearable every day for me, I might end up decluttering this. This is just not something, like these tones are just not something I'm reaching for every single day. And then I just don't find that the shimmers last on my eyes as I want them to. But for right now, I'm going to keep the Nomad palette. I will also be keeping my Dominique Cosmetics Latte palette. I'm very excited to reach into this one during the fall time. Just such a fall vibe basic palette, but I'm very happy to have this in my collection. Will be keeping. I really hope that like most of this video is in focus. I'm fearing that like it's not always in focus, but anyway. Okay, I'm definitely keeping, there's two more palettes that I purchased this year. So from Clarity Cosmetics, I have the So More Amazing palette, which I'm literally obsessed with. Like, I love this palette so much. Let me just, I don't think it's gonna be too similar. No, not at all, but okay, so then I have the Clionadh Cosmetics Dragon Fruit palette. Is there a dupe in this one for, let's see. Not at all. Yeah, not, I don't think at all, but I'm definitely obviously keeping my Clionadh palette. So happy with this one. Leave me your indie brand recommendations, indie brands you want to see me try next in the comments below. Okay, my hands were getting quite messy, so I re-swatched the two shades that we're still looking for dupes for. I don't know if we're gonna find them. My KKW Camel palette, not the best quality, but truly I love camo so much. I cannot get rid of this palette simply because of the packaging. We'll be keeping this. I am going to declutter this from Wander Beauty. I don't know that I've even reached into this, and I don't need this. We're decluttering it. My Muse palette from Vive Cosmetics I will definitely be keeping. I really enjoy just Jamie Genevieve in general, her brand, and this palette, so this will be a keep. I am going to declutter this little 6-pan. It actually is really good quality. I forget where this is from. It is really good quality, but I mean, I don't need this, right? No, I don't need this. I'm decluttering it. We all know my ABH Jackie palette is going nowhere far. This is definitely a keep, and I will also be keeping my Norvina palette. This is something I just, like, every time I'm like, I'm definitely gonna declutter this, then I'm like, no, I definitely can't get myself to declutter this. So this will be staying. The ABH Nueva palette is obviously new to my collection this year, so this will also be staying. And then the Sultry palette is an all-time favorite palette of mine as well, so this from ABH will also stay. So that means from ABH, we are left in my collection with the Master palette by Mario, the Amrezy palette, and the Carly Bible palette. I just updated my palettes on their last 2 raw, and you guys, I need to just declutter. I just need to declutter my ABH Mario palette. I'm gonna see if I can get these 3 shades depotted, these 3 matte shades, which are my favorite. It is time to say farewell to the ABH Mario palette. It is just time. I am going to declutter this. I'm also going to declutter my ABH Amrezy palette. We've already talked about this on my channel. I don't need this palette in my collection. The shades that I've been keeping it for, which are Barb and Cupcake, which actually Cupcake could be similar to, I'm just curious. Yeah, Cupcake's pretty close to that one, but still, this is more purple, this is more pink. Regardless, I am going to be decluttering the ABH Amrezy palette. I just don't ever get excited to reach for this one, so this one will be going. And I feel like I haven't been successful decluttering many palettes today, although I was very impressed with myself for the Pat McGrath declutter. But I also don't need this one in my collection any longer either. This is the ABH Carly palette. This just is boring to look at in my opinion. I just don't get inspired when I reach into this palette, and therefore it just sits on my shelf and collects dust. So I'm going to declutter this, meaning we're decluttering three palettes from ABH, and I am so excited about this. So then moving on to palettes I won't be decluttering. None of my Lunar Beauty palettes are going. So I have the Lunar Eclipse palette, which I am just curious. Those 2 are just, yep, those are different. Okay, so Lunar Eclipse. Did I even show this? I'm like, did I just look at it or did I actually put it on the camera? So that was what I was comparing. Then we have the Greek Goddess palette, which I love as just an easy everyday neutral palette with a pop of blue. And I don't think this blue is gonna be what I'm looking for either. Nope, definitely not. Definitely more of a dupe for the other, sorry, there we go. Definitely more of a dupe for the other Lunar palette. And then I have the Moonspell. Such a fun color story in the Moonspell palette. So definitely keeping all 3 of my Lunar Beauty palettes. I am going to keep both of my Rowan quads. I have the 75 degrees quad as well as the 1111 quad. I just think these shadows are really unique and I think they add value to my collection. So I will be keeping both of these. I am going to be decluttering my Trace Luce palette. I just don't get excited about this palette. It's not something I'm like itching to reach for, and I just have way too many other palettes in my collection. So this one I'll be getting rid of. I'm also going to be getting rid of this palette. This was from Folklore. I just didn't think the quality on this was good at all. This is their Prague palette and I just was not impressed at all. Another possibly shocking declutter. This is also a palette from my palettes on their last hurrah. It's the Tarte Love, Trust, and Fairy Dust. This palette has been very well loved in my collection, but I am ready to say bon voyage to this. There's quite a few cracked shades in this. It's not an easy palette to store, and I'm just ready to be done with it. So I will be decluttering this one from Tarte. We can do my melt palettes next. I have the Mary Jane palette. I do think the melt formula in general is one that you have to spend a little bit more time working towards, but I do love their packaging. I feel like I would keep the palettes or purchase palettes for their packaging alone. I have the Gemini 2 palette, which is new to my collection this year. I also have the Melt Rust palette, such a fun grungy palette for the fall. And then I also have the Gemini, another fun grungy palette here. Then I have Smoke Sessions, which is such a fun green palette. Like this, I just love so much. And then I have She's in Parties, which I barely have reached for at all. And even like the packaging on She's in Parties just isn't as like exciting to me as some of the other melt palettes. I think I'm gonna declutter this one, I think. Do I have other purpley shades? I'm gonna put this in the maybe pile for now, but this one I think I should declutter. I truly think I do, but I'm gonna put it in the maybe pile for now and we'll revisit this at the end. All right, you guys, getting so much closer to the end. So I am going to keep this one from Tarte. It is the Unleashed palette. This will be my only palette left from Tarte then. It's not a favorite of mine, but I do want to have one Tarte palette, and I do still like this palette. My large Huda palettes will not be going anywhere. We have Huda Mercury Retrograde, which is just an all-time favorite in my collection. I have the Naughty Nude, which looks like this. And then Rose Quartz, which is a really fun palette. I've actually had so much fun with this the last like 2 months or so. So definitely keeping all 3 of these. I'm gonna keep all 3 that I have left remaining in my collection from Dose of Colors. So I have the Sassy Siennas palette. This is a fun coral palette. I have Baked Browns, which is just such a staple brown matte palette to have in my collection. And then one of my all-time favorites, I have the Huda Beauty Friendcation palette, which will not be going anywhere at all. Can you see I'm wearing a bodysuit and like don't have it snapped clearly? So sorry that that's been hanging, and then like my slippers out here. So distracting. My Sigma palettes will also be going nowhere far. So I have the Sigma Enchanted palette, which I have really loved this year. I also have the Quarter Rosa palette, which is such a fun summery coral pink option. And then I have the Untamed palette, which is going to be such a fun grungy palette for the fall. Definitely keeping all of my Sigma palettes. This one from Rem Beauty is the Go-Go Boots palette. I purchased this year. I haven't even used this yet, so I will be keeping this. I am going to be keeping both of my Lawless palettes. I have the Glam one, which I really love, as well as the Baby one. I wasn't a fan of her really large palette, but I really like both of these. Okay, I tucked in my bodysuit, so hopefully it won't be like coming up the sides anymore. Alien Cosmetics, now Unearthly Cosmetics. I have the Not Normal palette, which I will keep, and then I have the Hauntingly Glamorous palette, which I will also keep just because I don't have these shades in my collection. It's definitely not a color story that I reach for all that often, but it is super unique to my collection. It's also indie, so I'm more inclined to keep it. So I'll be keeping both of these. Okay, this one from Rare Beauty, I'm gonna declutter. I thought I was gonna love this palette. This is the True to Myself palette, and I just didn't end up falling in love with this, so I'm good with decluttering this. Okay, this is what's left, you guys. I'm getting nervous. How many declutters do we have? Okay, off to the side over here are all of the palettes that I'll be decluttering. There's 23. So we still have 12. Ooh, 12 to find in here. Yikes. Okay, that scares me. Okay, let's see. Well, these two I know I can declutter. This one from Glamlite, this is the Pie palette. This one just doesn't store well. It's not a super inspiring color story, and I have others from Glamlite I like so much more that I'm gonna be keeping. And then the BH Cosmetics Lunar New Year palette is not gonna be a keep for me. I purchased this on a whim. I never should have. I'm not inspired by this palette. I will declutter this. I'm like looking through all this. I'm like, what else can I declutter? Okay, keeping my Glamlite Cake palette, obviously. Definitely gonna keep this. Definitely gonna keep my Glamlite Ice Cream Dream palette. Okay, these two from Juvia's. I know I can declutter the mauves. Like, I just barely ever reach for this. I don't think it's a great formula. I can declutter this. The Sweet Pinks, I think, is fun. Like, I don't have anything like these two shades. These are really the shades I keep it for. I'm gonna put this in my maybe pile. This is gonna be a maybe. Definitely keeping these two from BH Cosmetics. I have the Weekend Festival palette, which is just an all-time favorite in my collection. And then I have the 90s Remix Dance palette, which I love. I have two from Alter Ego. So I have the Canyon palette, which I'm gonna keep. I am gonna keep this just because I like the formula. I like this color story. I feel like this would be an easy one to be like, oh, I'm gonna get rid of it because I have these shades in my collection, but I like this palette. So I'm gonna keep this. And then I love my Alter Ego Artemis palette too. Love the color story. This is gonna be such a fun one for the fall, so I will keep this. I'm keeping all my Kaleidos palettes. I love them so much. I have the Escape Pod. I have the Club Nebula, which this is the other shade I wanted to, okay, let me swatch. Ooh, okay. Those are definitely very similar. Very similar to that Nabla, so maybe I can actually declutter the Nabla. Okay. Keeping Club Nebula, and then definitely keeping the 4 of these as well. So I have Sashimi City, a favorite. Futurism 3, which is Astro Pink. Another blue shade that's probably similar, but I think I found like a perfect dupe with that Club Nebula. And then also Lunar Lavender, which is probably my least used, but I still love these shades. And honestly, these purples are unique to my collection as well. So I will be keeping this, and we'll also be keeping my Flower Punk palette. Love this one so, so much. All right, we're really getting down to the nitty gritty. Keeping both my Patrick Tas. So I have Major Dimension 1, which I love so much. Camera battery is gonna die, shoot. And then I have Major Dimension 2, also love so much, and also purchased this year. Are we all living for the chocolate coin that's on my floor right there? I know I am. Okay, what else? Glamlite Chocolate Martini is a favorite, not going anywhere. None of these from Artist Couture will be going anywhere either. Supreme Mauves I purchased this year. It's probably my least favorite of the bunch, but I still really like it. And I also wonder this. Still not an exact dupe, but honestly, we're getting closer. Then I have Supreme Bronze, which is such a beautiful palette as well. And then I have Supreme Nudes, which is just an absolute all-time favorite, which brings me to this one. This is the Supreme like snack palette. There's a few new shades, but some of these are also repeats from the Supreme Nudes. So there are the two side by side. It's really, like, it's not even Supreme 2.0 I want to keep this for, although I do want to see. Okay, honestly, like Supreme better, but it's Brilliance that I'm like, I feel like I need to keep, but I know I don't. There is Brilliance before I drop it, although I do, like, there's, do I really need, no. I can declutter the snack. Okay, it's settled. I can declutter the Supreme Nudes, the Quickie from Artist Couture. That's actually, that's a step in the right direction because I didn't think I was going to do that. I love Artist Couture, so this and the Pat McGrath I'm so proud of myself for. I'm going to keep both of these from Too Faced. I have the Born This Way Natural Nudes palette. This is such a staple. This is a great palette. And then I also have the Pumpkin Spice palette, which I think is a fun option as well. You guys already know I'm keeping both of my Persona palettes. So we have the Identity 2 and a personal favorite of mine, the Identity 1. Such a good one. Okay, my Too Faced Palm Springs Dream palette, I am going to declutter. I just don't need this in my collection. Like, it's a good palette, it's fine, but I just don't need this. And then I'm pretty sure I'm keeping everything else. So Wild Greens I would declutter, but I purchased this year, so I again want it for my end of year ranking. But this did not wow or impress me. So keeping that for now. I have the Naked Honey, which I love. I'm super excited for this one for the fall time. Keeping this. I also have Wild West, which I think is a really good, just like neutral with pops option. So keeping that. And then also keeping these two from Urban Decay. I personally love the Stone Vibes palette. This is not going anywhere. And then I have my Born to Run, which I do love just for like neutral shades. I don't necessarily like the colorful shades in this. I think some of them are duds, but I can't part with this one. This one will be staying. Aether Beauty Rose Quartz, I really enjoy, definitely keeping this. So this one I'm actually like torn it up in the air on. Maybe I could see myself, decluttering this. Like, I just don't reach for these deep purples all that often. It's similar to how I feel about the Melt Cheese and Parties. So I'm gonna put this in the maybe pile because I feel like I'm definitely not to my 35 yet. I'm gonna set this aside. I'm gonna keep my Rose Quartz Quad from Aether Beauty, as well as this little Ametrine palette. I think both are really cute. Love these little options. And then I'm also going to be keeping my Juvia's Place Nomad palette. I just love this for a grungy, like, I love the grungy color story. It's not my favorite quality, but I still do really enjoy this color story and can appreciate this palette for that. So I will be keeping this. Okay, here are the palettes and quads that I am decluttering. There's 28, so I'm 7 short. Let me grab my maybe pile. I do feel good about decluttering the Nabla Midnight palette because I found a dupe for this shade right here, which is really the only reason I could see myself keeping this. I have a pastel blue somewhere in my collection, so I'm going to declutter this one. I also feel comfortable decluttering the Fleur Fantasia quad from Pat McGrath. I feel like I have a close enough shade to this that it'll look similar on the eyes, and I'm ready to part with this. So that'll put us at 30. My Aether Beauty quad, while this is beautiful, I just don't reach into deep purples super often. That's pretty. That shade, ugh. But like, how frequently am I gonna reach for something like this? Not that frequently at all, right? I'm gonna declutter this one from Aether. I'm gonna do it. Okay, so then we have Melt Cheese and Parties. And I'm gonna declutter this too. Do I need it for this? No, no I don't. I'm gonna declutter Melt Cheese and Parties. I'm good with that. Okay, Nabla Dreamy. Nabla Dreamy, do I want you? Okay, that shade is so beautiful. That's really pretty. Those two are really pretty, but hold on. I don't feel like I'm ready to part with Nabla Dreamy yet, and I don't want to declutter just to declutter, so I'm going to keep this. Then we have my Juvia's The Pinks, and let's see. So I'm keeping for this shade, and that. Oh, I don't feel like I'm going to have like a Barbie pink like this. But if I really, how often am I reaching for a Barbie pink like that? And truly, if I am, like if I'm craving a Barbie pink, I feel like I could order a single off of an indie website. Everything, like, I'm gonna declutter this one. I'm gonna declutter the Juvia's Pinks. I don't need it. I reach for it like twice a year and that's it. We're decluttering it, right? Yes, I can order an indie shadow if I want. Okay, next up we have Natasha Denona Gold. What just happened? Oh gosh, a shade fell out. I do like that shade. I wish this shade would have fallen out but not cracked. I do like those two. I do like those two. The shade that fell did not even break. Okay, these two shades from the green palette I like, I'm swatching against two out of the, oh, those are pretty similar. That's more green though. I do really like that. I have to have another green though. Like, ugh. Okay, so for right now, I can't get myself to part with the gold palette, so I'm keeping this. So then I have Stone Cold Fox, which I don't really want to get rid of, so I'm not going to, just because I feel like this does add some value to my collection, even though I do have the taupe palette. I'm going to keep this. I am going to keep this. That means I have 33 declutters. Give me one more minute to look through everything and see if there's 2 more I can declutter. Even if I find 1 more to declutter, that's still 20%. Missing by 0.5. Okay, you guys, in an odd turn of events, I have 3 more palettes actually that I've decided to declutter. 2 of them I purchased this year, and I decided it just doesn't make sense for me to not pass these along to people who could get use out of them just because I want to save them for my end of year ranking. I can always pop pictures on the screen, and these just didn't impress me. I don't feel like excited to continue to reach for them to add to my review at the end of the year. So I'm going to be decluttering the Natasha Denona Mini Crush palette, which is this one right here. Also the Urban Decay Wild Greens palette, which looks like this. And I actually think I'm going to declutter my Tarte Unleashed palette. This used to be a favorite palette of mine, but I filmed a couple videos with this the last few days, and I just like, don't feel that excitement like I once did for this palette. I used to absolutely love this palette, especially for the mauve row up top, but there are other palettes that I would prefer to reach into now for a mauve look over this palette. So I'm gonna pass this one along. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna declutter this one as well. Did not think I was gonna do that. Okay, you guys, and these are the final palettes that I'm decluttering. I'm decluttering 36 eyeshadow palettes slash quads, which I'm actually so proud of myself for. Looking at this, it looks like such a small pile, but I'm just so happy with this. I'm so happy to just get rid of some of these palettes that I'm not using but feel like I need to use and keep them in my collection for whatever reason or not. Very excited to just declutter anything, truthfully, as I like feel just very overwhelmed by not only my makeup collection, but I'm trying to like go through all my clothes now. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Would love to know if you were surprised by any of the declutters. Leave me your comments down below. Thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video, for supporting my channel, for supporting Palette Week. I appreciate you guys so much, and I will catch you tomorrow for another video. Bye.